In my last video called The Lazarus Transmission, I talked about how the resurrection codes are awakening right now in reference to a message I received from David Bowie referencing his Lazarus video. And it all symbolically relates to what is going on right now during this winter solstice and as we are coming into the end or close of a 9 year. 2025 is a 9 year, which makes it very significant for the idea of collapsing old timelines and moving back into 0 point energy. So, this is significant how all of this connects. And in this video, I am going to break it down into different stages, 4 stages of awakening that are happening to us individually and collectively now, and what we most need to know in order to understand what the process looks like and how we are expanding in our Christ consciousness and ability to move into higher timelines and collapse the old. Hello, beautiful intuitive souls. I'm Rachel Sawani, a spiritual medium and intuitive coach. And I'm glad you could join me today for this very important message as we are a couple days away from the winter solstice as I'm filming this now on December 18th. I am really excited to share this message with you because it's been building for a long time and it's been a few weeks since I shared the original part one called the Lazarus transmission. But in this video, I'm excited to delve even deeper into these 4 stages of awakening that are happening right now. So let's go right into the understanding, first of all, of what the winter solstice represents. It is the darkest point of the year and the rebirth of the light. So, as David Bowie was sharing with the resurrection phase, that technically is where we're going through right now. It's activating right now. These codes are turning online, and I'm even hearing as I am saying that because I invited David Bowie to come into this transmission and be here present with me as I share this message. I do have some notes and basic understanding of the concepts I'm going to be sharing, but I will be tuning to spirit and letting spirit flow in with any messages that David wants to share. If you're interested in learning more about how David Bowie works with us as a spirit guide and some of his galactic connections, please watch part one. I'll leave a link or card to that up here if you want to click on that now. But essentially, this is an extension of that original message that I took notes on a long time ago, but had to really come back into integration and understanding of it in order to share it with you today. So bear with me as I process this with you and allow David to also share what he wants to share. Essentially, he was just saying, though, that the whole month of December has been very activating, especially since the three-eye atlas is now coming into our awareness, and a lot of people have been talking about that and meaning and significance of that. I will recommend watching Magenta Pixie's latest channeling with the collective consciousness of the nine to understand really what that represents as part of our collective awakening journey, because it really relates to this message as well. So I will leave a link to her channeled message that she just posted. I saw popped up on my screen earlier today in the descriptions box if you're interested in hearing more about that. But it's all related. So, what I said at the end of the last video was that I was going to break down the 4 stages of this process. So, we're going to talk about resurrection not as one moment, but as a sequence. And so, stage one is the dark night of the soul and the death of the ego. In the last video, I talked about how through the resurrection phase, this is a time where illusions are being peeled back, false identities are dying, and ego attachments are dissolving at an accelerated rate, which means rebirth is also accelerating. And how quickly we form or align with these higher identities is essentially what our soul is calling us to activate right now. To understand how we are being called to step into higher embodiment of our Christ light and Christ Sophia templates that are coming online as we awaken. And so, stage one, dark night timeline exhaustion. This first stage is what most people recognize as the dark night of the soul, but on a higher level, it's actually a timeline exhaustion. So, what does that mean? Essentially, this is when old identities stop working, beliefs lose emotional charge, roles, relationships, careers, or missions feel hollow. Things you once cared about deeply suddenly feel non-relevant, or you just don't resonate anymore. So these are just some examples and ways that this could show up in your life. But essentially, I've been connecting a lot with individuals giving readings, and I'm noticing definitely a trend in the collective right now as a lot of people are finding themselves at the crossroads of making a huge life altering change. Work that they've been doing for years, loving and enjoying for years, just isn't resonating at that deep soul level anymore. They're just not feeling fully fulfilled, even in the relationships or the career choices or projects or things that they once cared about. And it just feels to me as though a lot of people are ready to step into new roles or commitments that really honor their soul's truth and the way that we are being called to express that, moving into the new 9 year cycle that we are on the edge or threshold of crossing into or birthing. A lot of people have also shared with me that they feel they are in the liminal stage of this part of their spiritual growth and that it can be very uncomfortable. And if you were to ask me on a personal level, I would say I've been in the liminal stage of my spiritual process for about at least a year now, really, since the last winter solstice, where I felt really activated and really aligned. And then there was definitely a huge slowdown phase in my own spiritual process that I talked about in a previous video. So I'll share the link up here if you're interested in hearing more about my story and lessons that I gained from that. But essentially, yeah, we're moving out of healing phase. So a lot of us have been really working on shadow work, and I'm not saying that's not important still. It definitely is. But we are moving more into an expansion stage, like where, and David Bowie is showing me, even using the word stage is relevant here because what does a performer do? He gets out and he gets on stage. He's not afraid to actually express himself more openly, share his creative ideas and in more open, out there kind of way. So essentially, I feel that that's what we are being prepared for, is what he's showing me, that a lot of us going through these dark nights of the soul, specifically in this year, because we go through many on our spiritual journey. So it's not a one and done type of thing, but some dark nights of the soul or periods of those catalytic growth periods or initiatory periods are really what push us out of our comfort zone to force us to step into our power in new ways. So we are moving away from the idea that these timelines are here to be healed and the structures that created them are here to be healed. It's more of a death of the old, a collapse of the timelines back into 0 point, which means anything that's been hijacked, distorted, or not written according to true organic source code. And I'm talking about structures, systems, belief paradigms that have infiltrated collective unconscious agreements and paradigms that have infiltrated us for so long, that these are actually collapsing and dying away. And so the higher message is to allow them to just slowly fade out of your life, and the new light will reveal. So, the old timelines aren't necessarily asking to be fixed. That's the other key point. They're reaching their expiration point. And so, from an ascension mechanics perspective, a timeline collapses when the soul no longer consents to its frequency. So, we are being called to not only see through the illusions, but to not consent, to choose sovereignty, to choose our authentic soul expression, to choose our divine truth embodied. Okay. And so that's why uh, it's important for us to not try to fix what appears to be broken, but to be willing to move on. And David Bowie is reminding me, he's been giving me, or my guides in general, my higher self, my guides, my team, have been giving me this analogy a lot going through this process. That it's kind of like the story of Lot in the Bible, where Sodom and Gomorrah, I believe, is a city that is being burned for just destructive, bad things that they're doing, evil conduct. And his family is saved by running away, but essentially they're not allowed to look back. Well, if they look back, they're guided not to look back. And if they do look back, they turn to stone. And unfortunately, some of his family, that did happen to them. And so it's symbolic of what we are being called to do. We are being asked to let go of the old and not look back, not get too caught up in why or how, but being willing to trust the process and our intuition, which is also turning online. Our psychic gifts are also activating and getting stronger with these higher light frequencies. So we are being called to learn how to trust ourselves more and our own inner guidance system to lead us through the dark tunnel, through the dark night, so to speak, which is also represented by the 3 days of darkness with the winter solstice, kind of like the birth canal phase, where higher light is born. And yes. So there's nothing wrong with you here. Your nervous system may feel heavy, tired, or numb because it's no longer being fed by outdated storylines. So this is where the narratives, the false narratives we start to awaken to those false narratives, and they start to just collapse because they don't have so much power on us anymore, because we've been doing the shadow integration and healing work. Essentially, that's prepared us to jump timelines at a more accelerated rate and to connect into the higher timelines. Now we know that the Earth timelines are splitting and have already split. And so we're moving into the higher timelines and allowing those old systems and timelines to fall. And this is essentially the tomb phase of the story of Lazarus, the biblical story version, where he's in the tomb, I believe, for 4 days. He's already dead before Yeshua calls him forth. So, spiritually speaking, this stage is recognizing something in me has already ended. It's already died. And essentially, we're catching up to the new timeline by being willing to let it go and allow it to be reborn. We can also, my guides were also giving me examples of different movies, like The Matrix, for example. So in that movie, Neo, essentially, he senses the Matrix is false. He starts waking up, the early discomfort before anything makes sense, and then the loss of meaning before new meaning arrives. But the mistake that people make here is trying to resurrect the old self and trying to build back the old program with the same outdated beliefs or identities that our ego is attached to from the past, but this is what keeps us in the karmic loop. So we kind of touched on all the things that we're essentially healing in part one of the Lazarus transmission, and now we're starting to understand why or how that's actually going to present. So essentially, this stage, the dark night of the soul, is all about allowing what wants to die to fully die. Stage 2 is the liminal space, or the 0 point energy stage. After the collapse comes this phase, the liminal, or the in between. This is the void, the 0 point, the place where no timeline is currently running. So here is where people often feel directionless, empty, but not depressed, as I mentioned before. And I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but like I said, there's a lot of information here to be integrated. And I have David Bowie kind of directing the process. So I am jumping in and out of dimensional energies here as I'm sharing my notes and remembering everything I want to say, or as it wants to come through. So, yeah, the place where no timeline is running, so people feel directionless, empty but not depressed, unmotivated but not necessarily hopeless. It just feels kind of like a plateau of some kind, but kind of, I would say you could feel a little bit stuck or just kind of sometimes there's a lot of start energy. You feel motivated, then you start doing something and it just kind of doesn't feel like the right time or it doesn't evolve into what you projected or what your intention was. It kind of just gets put on the shelf. The energy doesn't sustain itself, or you could feel detached from the past and unable to see the future. So, this is where the ego starts to get really nervous and starts to panic because the ego continuously needs to feel safe, um, to feel like things can be somewhat predictable. And to feel stabilized, right, energetically, in order to feel safe. And this is kind of the not the point in the timeline where that is happening. So the 0 point essentially is a rewriting of the entire script, is being willing to let go in order to be fully activated and aligned, and it's a tough process for the ego, and so there's a lot of anxiety and fear that usually comes to the surface, and of course that is also fears that are ready to be released. So this stage is also represented in different movies that my guides were giving me. The Willy Wonka tunnel scene, for example, isn't that crazy? I mean, when he's taking them through this tunnel and they're seeing all these weird dark imagery and it's just it gets a little weird. That's kind of where we're at. That's kind of what this stage represents. And I feel collectively what they're showing me is we are all gonna be going through on the bigger world stage or scene. That is the the phase where things just start to get revealed, shadows get exposed, and the underbelly of the whale gets exposed, and it can get very tricky to navigate that, especially when your spiritual discernment isn't clear or you're not super tuned to your intuition. And so the other movie was the Inside Out abstraction scene where they go through a doorway where they get all discombobulated, move into like 2D form and all these different dimensional forms, and then end up coming back on the other side of that. That's exactly the same type of scene or tunnel that we're moving through in this particular phase of the resurrection. So, essentially, this phase is where your identity becomes abstract. So, from an ascension perspective, all timelines have collapsed into neutrality. There's no karma is active, no future is predicted, no past is pulling on you. This is not a mistake, it's a reset field. So, most people panic and try to escape the stage, but the resurrection only happens after the void. So, this is essentially the pause between the death and the rebirth cycle, which is what that 3 day of darkness essentially represents with the winter solstice. So, stage three is the transfiguration and resurrection codes stage, or the transfiguration stage. This is where the Lazarus codes become activated, okay, being the resurrection codes. So, not as something added, but as something remembered. This is the remembering stage, the retuning stage, where we come back into harmony with our higher soul and our intuition, and we are able to see more clearly the path forward. So essentially, the word transfiguration means your soul blueprint begins to reassemble without the distortions of the old timelines. Okay. So here's how this usually will show up in sudden clarity after emptiness, new intuition or psychic sensitivity, feeling online again, but different. Truth landing in your body, but not just in your mind, a deeper alignment with Christ consciousness, not religious, but embodied. So, this isn't healing the old storylines. This is coming back into a new one. So, essentially, finding your balance, finding your 0 point, finding your center again, finding your stabilization, um, seeing yourself in the new mirror of your own soul and what you are essentially being called to resurrect are going to be those qualities, those expressions of self that are you're feeling inspired or activated by. And you will notice also synchronicities showing you the path forward. So when you're hitting the high note in David Bowie's terms is what he's showing me is the higher note or resonance field of your higher self. You will have synchronization automatically taking place and accelerating the more and more you follow through with action towards or taking grounded action, inspired action towards uh, those steps or what you're being guided to do. So in the Bible, Lazarus doesn't come out repaired. He comes out alive. He comes out like a new person, essentially. Energetically, this is the resurrection through zero point, where a new timeline is emerging that matches your original source frequency, your original source frequency code and DNA blueprint. And so that's what all of us are being activated to do. So this stage often happens quietly. It doesn't always happen very dramatically. It's more like I can see clearly now. Now I understand what this is about. It can come in aha moments, breakthrough moments, just higher awarenesses of truth and what something actually means and why things are happening had to happen that way, where it felt like you were losing a part of yourself. Now it feels like you're regaining a part of yourself and you're becoming inspired and empowered and understanding who you are again in a better, clearer way. And in a way where you can't now unknow the truth. And that's really important too. It's important to understand that once you see something clearly, once an illusion falls away, once an old timeline collapse, once a karmic loop reveals itself, you see it, and you can't unknow that, and you can't. You just move forward in new ways. Okay, so that's what's happening in this solstice moment as well. It's light, our eternal light and flame, returning from the deepest dark. And so the last stage, stage four, is the integration or embodied Christ consciousness stage. It's the final stage. This is where resurrection becomes a lived reality. Here, you don't chase your purpose, you embody it. You don't react, you discern. You don't leak energy, your field stabilizes others. You don't fight the illusion, you see through it. So, this is where Christ consciousness becomes quantum on a cellular level. This is where DNA strands are activating, dormant DNA codes are coming back online. You remember now who you are, and you understand that moving forward requires courage to be that which you already know yourself to be. So, excuse me, a tickle in my throat, and my phone alarm is going off, which is always a sign from spirit to wrap it up. But essentially, it's not about chasing your purpose, it's about being aligned with it or knowing that you already are aligned with it. And from this higher light, Christ light embodiment of your true self, you organically magnetize all that is for you, all that is of your highest timeline to you. And so I'm hearing my guides and David saying that these times are, it's going to be easier for some of us to manifest what we truly desire, because 2025 was a year of just kind of ending and letting things fall away, and so we're in that new 9 year cycle, and that's really about trusting our intuition and moving forward through full embodiment of what we want to create, but not giving consent to or permission for others or to leak our energy or to have to give consent to the old narratives and timelines that kept us down before. We're really raising or rising above all of that and transcending that and allowing those to collapse and fall away. So it's lived embodiment of our highest Christ light. You're not floating above life. You're inside it and you're grounded and you're present and you're sovereign and you're taking each action from that place of inner knowing. So this is essentially where in the movie The Matrix, Neo sees the code. This is where Lazarus in the Bible walks free. This is the light living in the body. And this is why this moment in time is so important because many are being asked to hold this frequency for others. So many of us are bridge builders. David Bowie mentioned that in his first Lazarus transmission. We're the builders and the healers. So we are quantum healers in a sense when we activate this within ourselves, when we come into this knowing and embodiment within ourselves, we activate that within others by being that in the world, by showing up as that Lazarus in a fully resurrected form, or yeah, as Yeshua did when he ascended and led by that example, or had gave us that seeding of his own ascension to fixed into this now timeline that's activating now. So with this winter solstice, very important one. So one of the practices David shared with me prior that we can do this winter solstice to align with these energies and really purify our own soul's knowing of and remembering process to anchor in is to light a single white candle in your home that represents unity consciousness, the eternal Christ light, the flame that cannot be extinguished, representing of your own soul's signature flame, eternal flame within. And hold the intention when you light this candle that fear dissolves, ego identities fall away, and what remains is eternal and of your organic source DNA blueprint. If it feels right, let that candle burn safely across 3 days if you can. But if not, you can also just allow it to burn, relight it for each day, but setting the attention. But one candle across 3 days, essentially, to where that candle you'll let it burn all the way out eventually. And only use it for this purpose. So, yeah, so this is one of the rituals that we can do, and that's pretty much all that I wanted to share with you guys today. And I'm not getting any other messages coming through. So I would love to know how this resonated for you. And please like and subscribe to my channel, like the video and subscribe to my channel because I do have more content coming out soon. And I am really excited to connect with you more online moving into the new year. So wishing you a happy winter solstice and looking forward to seeing you soon. Bye.